You've walked that street 100 times. Then one morning, out of nowhere, a bird dives at your head. Not a warning pass, a strike. And the strange part isn't that it happened, it's that nothing provoked it. You didn't touch a nest. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't even see the bird before it saw you. Here's the part that should unsettle you. That attack wasn't random, and it wasn't new. It was the final entry in a file that's been open on you for longer than you realize. Birds don't just react to humans in the moment. They remember faces. They build case histories. And once a verdict is reached, it rarely gets reopened. The bird in this story isn't guessing. She's not reacting out of blind instinct. She's running a system, one built on memory, pattern, and risk, that decides, individual by individual, who gets to be trusted and who gets marked. And once you're marked, that judgment doesn't stay with her. It spreads. This is the story of how that verdict gets built, how it spreads to birds who never met you, and why undoing it is so much harder than earning it in the first place. It came out of the low autumn light, wings folded tight, angled straight for your scalp. You ducked. You didn't understand why. You hadn't done anything. Not that morning, not that week, not that you could remember. And that's the detail that should stop you cold. You don't need to remember, because she does. What felt like an ambush was actually a conclusion. Somewhere behind that strike was a long, patient accumulation of evidence, gathered in moments so small you never registered them as evidence at all. A glance held a half-second too long. A hand that moved a little too fast near a fence post. A voice that rose when it should have stayed low. None of it felt like a test in the moment. It never does. That's what makes this kind of evaluation so unnerving. It runs entirely without your consent, and it never announces itself until the verdict is already final. Birds don't strike out of chaos. They strike out of certainty. By the time a wing meets your head, the deliberation is over. What you experienced as a sudden, senseless event was, from her side, the last procedural step in a case that had been building for days, maybe weeks. A decision reached quietly, then executed without hesitation. The question worth sitting with isn't why she attacked. It's what she saw, long before you ever noticed you were being watched. To her, you were never just a human. That category is too broad to be useful, and she doesn't have the luxury of treating it as reliable. The world she navigates is full of danger wearing a human shape, and safety wearing the exact same shape, so she learned early to look past the category and into the specifics, the details that make you you, and not simply one more large animal moving through her territory. She reads faces the way you might read a signature, the shape of your eyes, the way your brow sits, the particular rhythm of your walk. These aren't background noise to her. They're identifying features, cataloged and cross-referenced against everything she's observed about you before. Researchers have tested this directly, disguising and undisguising the same person, and found that crows and their relatives weren't fooled by a hat or a change of coat. They knew the face underneath. This is why two people can stand in the same yard, wearing similar clothes, moving at similar speeds, and receive entirely different receptions. One gets ignored, the other gets watched, tracked, followed for the length of the block, not because of what either one is wearing, because of who, specifically, she has already decided each of them to be. Most of what you do near her passes through her attention and leaves nothing behind, forgotten as quickly as it happened, filed under ordinary, irrelevant, safe. But a small number of moments don't fade. They lock in immediately, with a permanence that ordinary behavior never earns, because they cross a threshold her nervous system treats as unambiguous. A rock thrown in her direction, even one that misses by a wide margin, is one of those moments. The intent behind it means nothing to her. The trajectory does. A hand that closes around a branch near her nest, even out of curiosity rather than malice, is another. Proximity to her young overrides every other signal she might otherwise weigh. And a sudden fast movement made directly at her, the kind your body makes without asking permission when startled or annoyed, reads as an attack regardless of what you actually meant by it. These moments don't get averaged into a general impression. They get logged individually, in detail, and they weigh more than dozens of ordinary mornings combined. This is the asymmetry that makes her memory so unforgiving. Consistency built slowly across weeks can be undone in less than a second, by a single motion you may not even remember making. The escalation rarely happens all at once. It moves in stages, each one a small recalibration rather than a sudden leap, which is exactly why most people never notice it building until it's already arrived at its final form. It starts with wariness, a longer pause before she returns to the feeder, a few extra seconds of stillness when you step outside. Nothing dramatic enough to register as a warning sign. If nothing changes, wariness deepens into avoidance. She stops approaching when you're present at all. The visits shift to hours when she knows you're inside, the routine quietly rerouted around your presence rather than through it. This is often mistaken for the bird simply moving on, finding a better yard, losing interest. It isn't. It's a decision being enforced, a boundary she's drawn because your presence has become something to route around rather than tolerate. And if the triggering behavior repeats, if the thing that unsettled her happens again, avoidance hardens into something more active. She stops retreating and starts responding. A warning call aimed specifically at you, a low pass, a strike. Not because she's more frightened than before, but because she's concluded that distance alone isn't enough to keep her safe. At that point, she's no longer avoiding a threat. She's managing one. What happens next is the part most people never see coming, because it doesn't require a single other bird to have witnessed anything. The moment she identifies you as a threat, she doesn't just remember it privately. She announces it in a call specific enough that other birds nearby can tell the difference between something is generally wrong and that particular animal is dangerous. Other birds, ones who have never seen you do anything, who have no history with you at all, hear that call and update their own behavior accordingly. They don't investigate first. They don't wait for a second opinion. The call itself is treated as sufficient evidence, because in a world where hesitation can be fatal, trusting a neighbor's alarm is safer than verifying it yourself. This is how a single interaction, witnessed by one bird, becomes a reputation shared by many. You can walk into a yard you've never visited, near birds who have never laid eyes on you, and still be met with immediate alarm, mobbing, or flight. Because somewhere upstream, a call went out that flagged you before you arrived. It's easy to think of this as instinct, some blunt reflex without discrimination. It isn't. It's information moving through a network, verdict passed from one mind to another, and by the time it reaches you, you're not being judged. You're being informed on. The reach of her judgment doesn't stop with her, and it doesn't stop with the birds around her either. It extends forward, into chicks who weren't alive when the original event happened, who never saw the rock thrown or the nest disturbed, who have no memory of you at all because they have no memory of anything yet. And still, they learn to fear you. Researchers who marked specific individuals as dangerous, often by handling them briefly during banding, found something unsettling in the years that followed. Offspring of those birds reacted to the same marked individuals with alarm, even when the young birds had never personally been handled, never been present for the original encounter, never had a reason of their own to be afraid. The fear didn't originate in them. It was installed, passed down through observation of a parent's alarm response until it became indistinguishable from an inherited instinct. This means the verdict against you can outlive the very bird who reached it. She might die, might move on, might forget the specifics with age, and still, her children, and possibly her children's children, will carry forward a caution they never earned firsthand. You become a danger by reputation alone, known to birds who will never know why, only that you are something to watch. Trust, if it ever comes, comes slowly and on her terms. Built one unremarkable morning at a time, across weeks she spends quietly measuring you against herself. It has to be earned in installments, each one small, each one reversible, because nothing about her biology allows her to extend it in a single leap. Safety is a conclusion she arrives at only after exhausting every reasonable alternative. Suspicion follows no such rules. It doesn't accumulate. It detonates. One thrown object, one hand too close to a nest, one sudden movement, and years of careful, patient observation can be overwritten in the time it takes to blink. There is no equivalent tally working in your favor, no ledger of good mornings large enough to counterbalance a single bad second. The math was never designed to be fair, because fairness was never the goal. Survival was. This is the asymmetry worth sitting with. It can take a month of identical, boring, trustworthy mornings to be seen as safe, and it takes less than a second to be seen as a threat again, possibly permanently. What looks like an overreaction from your side of things is, from hers, simply proportionate caution, weighted so heavily towards suspicion because the cost of misjudging a real threat as harmless is so much higher than the cost of misjudging a harmless person as dangerous. There's a specific moment people describe when this reaches its final form, and it's almost always the same. They step outside into a yard that used to be neutral ground, and every bird in range reacts at once. Not one alarm call trailing into silence, but several, overlapping, coming from different directions, different species sometimes, all converging on the same conclusion about the same person at the same time. This isn't coincidence, and it isn't every bird independently deciding you're dangerous on its own. It's what happens when a single verdict, passed along enough alarm calls and enough seasons, stops being one bird's opinion and becomes the default assumption of an entire local population. New arrivals learn it from established residents. Established residents reinforce it in each other every time you appear, and the reaction fires again, each instance confirming the last. At that point, you're no longer dealing with an individual grudge. You're dealing with a consensus, distributed across dozens of birds who may never interact with each other directly, but who all agree, without needing to compare notes, that you are the one to watch. It's the closest thing in nature to a reputation that precedes you into every room, except the room is your own backyard, and you never got a vote in how it was decided. It isn't impossible, but it isn't easy either, and it certainly isn't fast, and anyone hoping for a shortcut should abandon the idea now. Reclassification, when it happens, requires exactly what earning trust required the first time: sustained, unremarkable consistency. Except now, it has to be performed against a headwind of prior suspicion that colors every new piece of evidence you offer. It means showing up, over and over, doing nothing to confirm the fear, for far longer than the original good behavior that was undone in a single second. It means tolerating alarm calls and distance and avoidance without reacting, because any frustration on your part, any sudden movement born of your own irritation, only confirms what she already suspected. The old evidence doesn't disappear to make room for the new. It has to be outweighed, and outweighing takes volume the original trust never needed. Even then, there's no guarantee. Some individuals never move past the verdict, no matter how much good behavior follows it. Others do, slowly, after months, sometimes longer than a full season. What determines the outcome isn't your effort alone. It's whether she, in her own time and by her own private accounting, decides the new evidence has finally become undeniable. And that decision, like the first one, was never really yours to make.